What if the people who hurt you only have power because you keep reacting? Think about the last insult, argument, or disrespect you couldn't stop replaying in your mind. They moved on, but you kept fighting the conversation in your head. The Stoics understood a brutal truth. The moment you lose control of your reaction, you give someone else control over you. And today you'll learn 10 Stoic laws that can make you harder to provoke, harder to manipulate, and far more difficult to shake. Listen closely, my friends. I want you to think about the last time someone said something to you, something small, maybe careless, maybe insignificant, and yet it stayed with you. It replayed in your mind for hours, maybe days. You kept rehearsing what you should have said. You replayed the conversation in different ways. You imagined a better response, a sharper response, a stronger response. And even when the moment was over, it was not over inside you. Now here is the question almost nobody asks. Where were you during all of that? Not physically. I mean, where was your mind? Where was your focus? Where was your peace? Gone, handed over, surrendered completely to someone who probably forgot what they said 5 minutes after saying it. That is not just a bad moment. That is a pattern. And if you have never learned to see that pattern clearly, then it has probably been quietly shaping your life for years. What I am about to share with you is not motivation. It is not a list of shallow tips. It is not feel-good advice designed to fade by tomorrow morning. This is a psychological and philosophical framework built on more than 2,000 years of Stoic insight, a way of moving through the world with more control, more clarity, and more power. By the time this is over, you will understand why some of the most powerful people in history, emperors, philosophers, generals, leaders, all seem to share one overlooked trait. They knew when not to speak. They knew when not to react. They understood that silence, real, chosen, disciplined silence, is not emptiness. It is structure. It is architecture. It is the inner framework that holds everything else together. And here is the uncomfortable part. As we go through this, you are going to recognize yourself in the patterns, in the overreactions, in the exhaustion that comes from constantly answering a world that does not deserve all of your energy. Do not run from that recognition. That is where the shift begins. Stay with me, because this may ask a lot from you, but it will give you far more in return. Law 1. Your reaction is not your response. It is your surrender. Let's begin with something simple but life-changing. A reaction and a response are not the same thing. A reaction is automatic. It happens before you think. It is the flinch, the defensive text sent too quickly, the sharp reply, the need to correct someone immediately, the explanation that spills out before your mind has even settled. Reactions are fast. They are emotional, and most of the time, they are costly. A response is different. A response is chosen. It is deliberate. It comes from awareness, not impulse. And sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and one of the most powerful men alive in his time, wrote in private that his greatest daily battle was not against enemies, politics, or the burden of empire. It was against his own impulse to react. Think about that. A man commanding armies, ruling an empire, surrounded every day by pressure, conflict, and provocation, and the battle he took most seriously was the battle within himself. Why? Because he understood something most people never learn. The moment you react, you reveal yourself. You show what disturbs you. You show what moves you. You show what has the power to pull you out of your center. And once that becomes visible, whether people mean to use it or not, it gives them leverage over you. Now bring this closer to your own life. Think about the people who seem unshakable. Not cold, not detached, just grounded. The ones who do not take the bait. The ones who do not need to win every argument. The ones who do not visibly unravel when someone tries to provoke them. There is something magnetic about those people. They command respect without demanding it. And most people assume that kind of composure is personality. Something you are born with. It is not. It is practice. It is a daily, deliberate, often uncomfortable practice of refusing to let the outer world dictate your inner condition. Every time something external controls your internal state, you may still appear to be in charge, but in reality, someone else is steering. Epictetus understood this at the deepest level. Born into slavery, he developed a philosophy not of escape, but of inner freedom. He taught that while the world may touch your body, your circumstances, your comfort, it cannot own your judgments, your values, or your chosen responses unless you surrender them. Between what happens and what you do, there is a space. Most people have never learned to find that space. They live so close to the surface of experience that stimulus and response feel like the same event. Something happens, and they act. Something is said, and they answer. Someone pushes, and they push back. But the entire Stoic project and the entire project of becoming powerful in your own life is about finding that space and learning to live inside it. So the next time someone says something designed to get under your skin, pause. Do not perform. Do not answer immediately. Just notice the impulse. Feel it rising. Watch it the way you would watch a wave coming towards shore. The wave is real. It has force. But you do not have to be carried away by it. That moment, even 1 second of awareness, is where your freedom begins. At first, it will not feel like power. It will feel like restraint. It will feel like holding something back that wants to come out. But that is not weakness. That is sovereignty. That is you choosing how you engage with life instead of letting life choose for you. And that is the foundation of real power. Law 2. Silence is not the absence of strength. It is its fullest expression. We live in a world that confuses noise with power. The loudest person is assumed to be the most confident. The fastest reply is mistaken for intelligence. The person who always has a comeback, always answers, always stays visibly engaged is often seen as dominant. But watch closely. Those people become easy to read. People learn their triggers. They learn what gets a response. They learn exactly which buttons to press. And once someone becomes emotionally predictable, they become easy to manipulate. Now contrast that with silence. Not awkward silence. Not fearful silence. Not silence because you have nothing to say. But chosen silence. The silence of someone who has decided that this moment, this comment, this situation does not deserve their engagement. That kind of silence unsettles people. Not because it is aggressive, but because it gives them nothing. When you respond, even angrily, you confirm impact. You tell the other person, you reached me. Silence offers no such confirmation. It creates uncertainty. And most people do not know what to do with uncertainty. So while you remain centered, they begin to fill the empty space with their own assumptions, anxieties, and interpretations. The Stoics had a word for this kind of steadiness: apatheia. Not apathy in the modern sense. Not numbness. Not indifference. But inner stability. Freedom from being ruled by what you feel. Silence is one of the clearest expressions of that stability. Think of the people in history, literature, or your own life whose presence carried weight. They were rarely the ones speaking the most. They were the ones speaking with the most intention. Their words mattered because they had not wasted them. Scarcity creates value. What is always available is rarely appreciated. That is true in economics, and it is true in human behavior. If you respond to everything, your responses become cheap. They become expected. They lose their weight. But when you become selective, when your words are not automatic, when your attention is not easily accessed, your presence becomes meaningful. People listen differently, not because you demanded it, because your restraint taught them that when you speak, it matters. And yes, this is difficult, because the urge to respond is tied to something very human, the desire to be understood, the desire to be seen accurately, the desire to defend yourself when your integrity feels challenged. Those desires are real. But when they run on autopilot, they stop being needs and start becoming chains. Chosen silence breaks those chains. This is not about becoming cold or withdrawn. It is about becoming intentional, speaking when it matters, withholding when it does not, and reserving your full presence for what is actually worthy of it. Law 3. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided. Here is a difficult truth. Some people have already made up their minds about you, about your intentions, about your motives, about your character, about something you said weeks ago or years ago. And no matter how carefully you explain, they are not truly listening. Not always because they are malicious, sometimes simply because they are looking at you through a lens shaped by their own fears, wounds, expectations, and experiences. What they see is not just you. It is you filtered through everything they already believe. And no explanation can clean someone else's lens from the outside. This is where so much human energy gets wasted, in over-explaining. And usually it comes from a sincere place. You want fairness, you want clarity, you want someone to understand what you really meant. Sometimes that is appropriate. Sometimes a clear conversation genuinely helps. But often, explanation is not clarity. It is anxiety. It is the urge to justify yourself before anyone even asks. The need to make sure everyone understands your reasoning. The instinct to defend choices that needed no defense at all. And that kind of explanation is not communication. It is a quiet request for permission. It teaches other people that your stability depends on their understanding. Seneca warned against being disturbed by what you cannot control. And other people's perceptions of you, for the most part, belong in that category. You may influence them over time through your actions, but you cannot force them in the moment by talking more. So ask yourself a different question. Not, how do I make them understand me? Ask, do I understand myself? Do you know what you meant? Do you know what your intention was? Are you clear within yourself? If the answer is yes, then you already possess the clarity you were seeking. Now you are no longer outsourcing your piece to somebody else's opinion. That shift from external validation to internal clarity is one of the deepest Stoic practices there is, and one of the hardest, because we are wired for approval. We are wired to want our group to understand us. But modern life is full of people whose opinions are not central to your piece, yet you still spend enormous energy trying to manage their perception. What if you stopped? Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, case by case, interaction by interaction. In some relationships, explanation is worth it. In close relationships, in practical working relationships, in situations where the other person is truly open, then yes, speak clearly. But in all the other cases where explanation is coming from discomfort, fear, or habit, the wiser move is often simple. Let it go. Stay clear within yourself. And let your actions say, over time, what your words cannot force in a moment. When you do this, something remarkable happens. The weight lifts. Mental energy returns. And the space once occupied by rehearsing misunderstandings becomes available for something much better, actually living. Law 4. The person who controls the pace controls the power. Speed is seductive. We are taught to admire the fastest reply, the quickest reaction, the person who never keeps anyone waiting. And in some areas of life, speed can be useful. But in human interaction, speed often gives away power. If you always respond immediately, always engage instantly, always make yourself available, you create a pattern. And patterns become expectations. Then, expectations become entitlements. The person who always replies in 5 minutes gets judged when they take 1 hour. The person who is always available becomes someone others assume will always be available, and the moment your availability becomes expected, it loses value. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about slowness, not laziness, but deliberateness. The ability to make sure action comes from character, not from momentum. When everything around you is rushing, The person who moves at their own pace stands out. They are not reacting to urgency. They are responding from principle. That applies to conversation, decision-making, conflict, and provocation. When someone tries to provoke you, they are often trying to accelerate you past your own control. They want you to move faster than your wisdom, to speak faster than your discernment, to reveal more than you intended. The powerful response is not to match their speed. It is to slow down, to breathe, to pause, to remain at your own pace. Yes, that feels uncomfortable. Silence feels uncomfortable. Pausing feels unnatural. Taking your time feels almost rebellious in a world addicted to instant reaction. But discomfort is not a sign you are wrong. It is often a sign you are finally doing something different. And over time, people begin to feel that difference. They realize you cannot be rushed. They realize your tempo is your own. They realize they cannot control your speed. And that changes everything. Law 5. What you do not feed cannot live. Anything in your life that drains you survives by feeding on your energy. A repeated conflict, an old resentment, an argument that never ends, a memory you keep revisiting, an anxiety you keep rehearsing. These things do not sustain themselves. They require your participation. This is not blame. It is power. Because if your attention is helping keep something alive, then your attention also has the power to stop. The Stoics understood that many of our problems are not fixed objects. They are processes. And processes require participation. Think of an old argument. It should have ended, but one person keeps reviving it, bringing it into new conversations, using it as evidence, returning to it again and again. And the other person keeps responding. What happens if the second person stops feeding it? Not dramatically, not with a speech, not with visible frustration, just by quietly refusing to keep it alive. At first, there may be escalation. People often push harder when an old source of emotional fuel disappears, but eventually, without your participation, the fire weakens. Then it dies. The same is true internally. What thoughts are you feeding? What old scenes are you replaying? What wounds are you refreshing with constant attention? Every mental rehearsal is a form of feeding. That does not mean suppressing pain. It means recognizing that replaying pain is not the same as healing it. Sometimes it is just the habit of suffering. So choose one thing, one conflict, one thought pattern, one story, and stop feeding it. Let it sit without your attention. And watch how much smaller it becomes when you stop giving it life. Law 6. Your standard sets your atmosphere. Raise it quietly. There is a loud version of personal growth. It announces itself. It broadcasts change. It needs witnesses in order to feel real. Then there is the Stoic version. Quiet, private, steady. It happens through decisions, not declarations. Through repeated behavior, not performance. Through standards so consistently lived that people feel the change before you ever speak about it. Marcus Aurelius did not write for applause. His meditations were private. His real work happened between him and himself. That is the model. When you quietly decide what you will and will not accept in your environment, in your relationships, in your own conduct, you do not need to announce it. People feel it. You respond less. You engage less with nonsense. You stop rewarding what does not deserve reward. You stop appearing in every conflict you are invited to. And yes, people will test it. They will try new angles. They will push harder. They will want to know whether the change is real. Let them test it. Your job is not to explain the standard. Your job is to hold it. Again and again, without drama, until it becomes unmistakable. And here is the part nobody talks about. Most of your strongest moments of discipline will happen in private. No applause, no recognition, no one congratulating you for not sending the message, not reacting, not correcting the lie, not entering the argument. You will have to find the reward within yourself. That is difficult. But it is also the point. Because the goal is not to become someone who is praised for discipline. It is to become someone whose sense of self no longer depends on praise. And when that happens, the atmosphere around you changes. Not because the world changed, because you did. Law 7. What you tolerate teaches people how to treat you. Every interaction teaches. It teaches people what gets a response from you, what you overlook, what you will accept, where your limits actually are. And people learn from this, not always consciously, not always maliciously, but constantly. If provocation gets your energy, people learn that provocation works. If questioning you always produces explanations, people learn that doubt controls your attention. If poor treatment never changes your availability, people learn that access to you has no cost. This is simply the mechanics of human behavior. Epictetus spoke about guarding the entrance to the mind. Not everything deserves entry. Not every comment deserves a place in your thoughts. Not every conflict deserves your participation. And this is true not only in dramatic moments, but in small ones. The casual disrespect, the repeated patterns, the little violations you excuse because calling them out seems too exhausting. Those moments matter. This does not mean becoming combative. It does not mean reacting to every offense. It means becoming clear about what aligns with the person you are becoming and quietly withdrawing your energy from what does not. Not withdrawing from people entirely. Withdrawing from patterns, from dynamics, from ways of relating that repeatedly pull you out of alignment. When you do that, relationships often shift, not because you held a dramatic boundary-setting speech, but because your behavior changed consistently enough that the other person had to recalibrate. This is one of the deepest forms of influence available to you, changing yourself so steadily that the world around you is forced to respond. Law 8. The mind that is not directed will always be captured. If you are not choosing where your attention goes, someone else is. That is the truth. And it does not require a conspiracy. It is simply the reality of a world full of forces competing for the most valuable thing you possess, your awareness. The Stoics recognized this long before modern technology. Seneca wrote that life is not short, we simply waste much of it, not through intention, but through inattention. The undirected mind follows stimulation, novelty, threat, drama, comparison, social tension. That is human biology. But if you do not direct your mind, that biology will be used against you. And the cost is not just distraction, it is identity. Because what you repeatedly attend to begins to shape who you become. The thoughts you rehearse deepen. The emotions you repeat become familiar. The mental grooves you return to become your default way of being. If those grooves are carved by outrage, comparison, fear, and endless low-grade stimulation, then your character is being shaped by forces outside your control. The Stoic answer is directed attention, not perfection, not mental rigidity, not suppressing every distraction, but regularly asking, is this worthy of my focus? Is this aligned with who I want to become? If I were choosing consciously, would I give this my awareness? That question changes everything, because you begin to see how much of what captures you does not actually matter to you. It only succeeded because it was designed to be hard to ignore. And when you reclaim that attention, something beautiful happens. Your mind grows quieter. Your anxiety lessens. Your thinking deepens. Not because you added more, but because you stopped giving yourself away. Law 9. True freedom is mastery of self, not mastery of others. Let us be clear, the purpose of all of this is not to control other people. It is not to become more intimidating, not to manipulate better, not to win more social games, not to gain some secret advantage over others. That misses the entire point. The Stoics were direct about this. The only mastery truly worth pursuing is mastery of yourself, not your circumstances, because they change, Not other people's opinions because they are unstable. Not outcomes because they depend on too many things beyond you. But your judgments, your values, your attention, your character, your responses. These are yours. Whatever happens around you, these remain the one domain that can still be governed from within. Epictetus taught this from slavery. Marcus Aurelius taught it from the throne. Different worlds. Same truth. Freedom is not something the outside world gives you. It is something you build within yourself. So all of these practices, choosing your response, guarding your attention, refusing to feed the unnecessary, setting standards, withdrawing from automatic engagement, are not about power over others. They are about creating an inner life that belongs to you. Stable, clear, unshaken. That is real power. Law 10. The long game is the only game worth playing. We live in a culture built for immediacy. Immediate feedback. Immediate reaction. Immediate gratification. But the Stoics understood something that modern life keeps trying to make us forget. Patience is power. The person playing the long game is not desperate to resolve every tension today. They are not obsessed with being understood immediately. They are not baited by every short-term provocation. They are anchored in a larger arc. Marcus Aurelius spent years dealing with difficulty, corruption, pressure, and uncertainty. Again and again, he returned to the long view. This difficulty is real, yes, but it is one moment in a much larger story. That perspective changes how you live. Every time you choose not to react impulsively, you make a deposit into your future self. Every time you maintain your standard, choose silence, redirect your attention, or refuse old habits, you are building something. It does not always look dramatic. You may not see immediate results. No one may notice right away. But over time, the change becomes total. The reactions that once felt inevitable begin to loosen. The need for constant validation begins to quiet. The feeling of being controlled by circumstances begins to fade, and what replaces it is something difficult to describe unless you have lived it. It looks like calm. It feels like freedom. Not freedom from challenge, freedom from being owned by challenge. Freedom from the exhausting need to manage everyone's perception. Freedom from the compulsion to react to every misunderstanding, every insult, every invitation into chaos. That freedom is real, and it is built slowly, one decision at a time, one moment at a time, one quiet act of self-mastery after another. So let me leave you with this. Everything we have talked about comes down to one thing. Choice, not one giant dramatic choice, not a speech, not a declaration. A small, private, daily choice. The choice to notice the impulse before it becomes action. The choice to remain silent when noise would only weaken you. The choice to let go of what does not deserve your life. Sometimes you will speak. Sometimes you will stay silent. Sometimes you will explain. Sometimes you will walk away. The point is not which option you choose. The point is that you choose. That you remain the author of your response instead of becoming the product of your reaction. That is what the Stoics practiced, not perfection. Practice, again and again. So start today. Start small. One moment of awareness before reaction. One silence instead of noise. One conversation released instead of prolonged. One act of discipline that nobody sees but you. Then another. And another. That is how everything changes.